So we're starting on making the Merlin costume for my brother, and we're using this pattern here from Simplicity as a base. We won't be making the sleeves this large, and we also won't be having a collar. Instead, we'll just have a slit down the front with some lacing. And let's start with cutting out the pattern. Who holds scissors like that? Also with the pattern, we just quickly draped it over my brother to make sure that we get the size sort of correct. We didn't want to cut out the smallest size because we know he will grow and we might want to use this pattern in future. And the fabric that we're using is just this cheap linen that I bought off eBay. It was like $7 per meter. It's more like a cheesecloth, and it's got quite a bit of stretch, so it's quite nice to work with. So cutting out the front and back pieces as well as the front facing, and then cutting the slit through the front facing here, and then stitching that down right sides together. And then just cutting away the excess fabric at the edge or the corner there, and then folding the facing inwards to the inside of the shirt, and also pinning the seam allowance under as well so all the raw edges are covered. And then sew that into place. So I'm just doing a top stitch here. If you want it to look more authentic to the time period, you could hand stitch it down, but I wanted this to be a fast and easy project, so I just machine stitched everything. So moving on to the shoulder seams, I'm matching up the front and back pieces at the shoulders and then sewing those in place. I am sewing, I think they're called French seams, where you sew the wrong sides together first, and then you trim away the excess seam allowance, like I'm doing here, and then you flip it so the wrong sides are touching. Is that right? Then you sew right sides together. So the seam allowance is hidden away within that second seam that you sew. So basically each seam has two seams sewn, one to sew the pieces together and then the other to hide the raw edges. And I did that for all of the seams on this shirt. Now moving on to the, what's this? The neck facing, I just cut out a strip of fabric, and don't do what I did, but I cut it out along the grain line, hoping that that grain line wouldn't need to be finished since it's not a raw edge that will fray. But because I did it on the grain line, it meant that the fabric wouldn't stretch. It wouldn't stretch around the curve of the neck. So I ended up just trimming off this grain line seam allowance anyway. And now I'm moving on to attaching the sleeves. So I matched up the top center part of the sleeve to the middle of the shirt, so where the shoulder seam is, and then pinned that across the shirt. This is really hard to explain, but you get the idea by just watching the clips. And then sew that straight down, trim the seam allowance, and then again turn the fabric so right sides are together to encase that seam allowance within that seam. And now he looks like a scarecrow. And we're pinning the sleeve and the side seams. We're making it extra baggy. Again, like I said, he will grow, so we don't want this to be too small to the point where he can't wear it when he gets older. So I've pinned the sleeve and the side seams, and when I stitch this I start from the underarm seam and sew outwards along the sleeve, and then I start from the same place and then sew down to the bottom of the shirt. And I do this for ease of movement. And here again, flipping out to the right sides together so I can encase those seam allowances, and then sewing those down. And here I'm showing the seam allowances on the inside, how they're encased. What am I doing here? Oh, I'm hemming the cuff of the sleeve, so I just turned the edge inwards by about an inch or an inch and a half, and then sewed that down. Again, you can hand stitch this if you want a more authentic look, but I didn't bother. And now for the actual hem of the shirt, fold it in half so you get the hem cut evenly on both sides. I made the back a little longer than the front, and then just sewed that down with a narrow hem. So as this shirt was really big on my brother, he didn't like how deep the slit in the front went, so I hand stitched this closed to give it like the look of a slit not being down that far, if that makes sense. So yeah, stitching that closed, and then the remaining part of the slit that's left at the top, I put eyelets in there. I did 3 eyelets on either side, so 6 altogether. So just puncturing the fabric with an awl and then stitching in that eyelet hole, and then repeating that for the 5 other eyelets. And once that was done, that's it. The shirt's done. As you can see, the shirt is super big on my brother, but that's okay. And for the Merlin costume, we added this belt. And we also rolled up the sleeves to make the shirt fit him a little bit better, and then added the same type of fabric, so that linen that I bought off eBay, but in a red color of course, and then cut that out into a large triangle, tied that around the neck, and that's the Merlin costume done. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.